Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Bicassa. Today we have on the line Cliff Watson. Cliff, you spent about 3 years working your way up through an Alaskan guide program, everything from washing dishes to guiding, etc. So you've got your experience there. But most importantly, I think you're known for conservation and bringing people into the sport of fly fishing. And you did a lot of that through the Emerging podcast, which is a TU venture for the Five Rivers program, which is also in collaboration with Costa in bringing universities into the mix of fly fishing. In fact, episode 131 that I did with Jackson Oaks out of the University of Mississippi was part of that Five Rivers program. And we talked about, is that potentially a great future, I would say, funnel or feeding area for new anglers, et cetera, to get exposed to in the right ways. So it's great to have you on the show today. We're going to walk through some of the conservation things that you've done with TU Five Rivers. We're going to talk a little bit of Pebble Mine. And then at the end of the show, we're going to wrap up with one of your tips, and that is the tactical grid methodology that you use in fly fishing. So I'm excited to hear about that as well. So, hey, Cliff, it's great to finally meet you in person. We've kind of chit-chatted through various ways in the past, but glad to have you on the show, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I've hosted podcasts before, but never been a guest. So
yeah.
The nerves are different. That's for sure. When I'm hosting, it's like, all right, I got the steering wheel and now I'm in the passenger seat. So I trust you. We'll have a good chat.
Great. Well, I appreciate the trust, but you're still in the wheel. We want to hear your opinions, your perspective, et cetera. Not mine as much, but, so yeah, let's dive in, man. You've got
Awesome.
this Five Rivers program that you were a big participant in. Kind of describe what that is, maybe a little bit, and in the conservation side of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the program is called the TU Costa Five Rivers program. TU, Trout Unlimited, and that being the national organization of Trout Unlimited, and then Costa Sunglasses providing most of the funding and the financial support for this program. And the Five Rivers referring to just, college students and student run programs that help engage other college students in fly fishing. So TU and Costa help provide some organization from the top, right? So there's a TU Costa Five Rivers coordinator. Her name's Libby. She's incredible right now. She's doing a really good job, but she just sort of gives us all guidance. And then every single university is in charge of finding presidents and officers and, gear and things like that. And they do all the local recruiting on their college campus. They pick what conservation projects they want to do. They do their own community building. So whether that's fly tying, watching a river runs through it, or, a different fly fishing movie, whatever it might be. So it's really cool because it's very student based and student run, Trout Unlimited, like I said, provides some guidance, sort of gives us like the walls of the bowling machine. What do you call those things? Like the little liners, so you don't go into the gutter.
The gutters,
and
right?
they just, exactly.
The bumpers. The bumpers.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So they just kind of give us the bumpers and we kind of go, because we're all learning, you know what I mean? Like the first budget I ever wrote was because of that program. And that experience is like just as valuable as any college course, you know what I mean? So that's the general, overview of the program. And then, like I said,
so let me ask a quick question. So do they provide infrastructure and kind of like a guidance in that scenario, but did they also provide some funding to the university to kind of get them upstarted in their conservation efforts, or maybe some trips, et cetera?
So the funding is sort of different, right? So we can apply for, sometimes there's projects, right, where you can complete, like we had a conservation project, I think it was when I was the intern, and different schools competed to be the best conservation project and then get a grant to do that sort of project.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
The best thing they provide to us is really just like gear and, swag and things that help us drive membership, right? So they'll give us things like, we'll work with Costa Sunglasses, and Costa will send us some sunglasses, some hats, some stickers, and we'll say, hey, we're going to have a raffle. Everyone come watch this movie. We'll sell some raffle tickets, or we'll just once you become a member, you get a raffle ticket.
Gotcha.
And every single school has their own program. So, we had membership fees to be a part of the club. Some schools find ways to avoid membership fees, right? It really depends on every single university.
And remind me what university you were at.
I was at University of Colorado Boulder.
Okay, that's what I recalled. Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
great place.
And pretty sizable program there, I would assume, given all the water and access around.
Exactly. And, it's a very dynamic program too. When I arrived as a freshman, there was probably 6 or 7 people in the intro meeting, the first meeting of the semester. And I met these 2 other guys, my buddy Tayo and Anthony, and the 3 of us really worked to propel that program. And the second year that we were all part of it, we were all officers. And then the third year, my buddy Anthony became president, and we went crazy, man. We went all in on the recruitment aspect. We would go to every single club fair or event, and we would just walk up to people, every single person. Hey, you ever been fly fishing? And they're like, my grandpa does that, I don't know about that. Like, what do you mean? Like, you wear the overalls and you stand in the water? And I'm like, yeah, that one, And we had so many freshmen and sophomore students that had never fly fished before that we really just brought in. So by the time we had all graduated, the program had grown from about 20, 25 students, I'd say, to over 100 active members, actively competing to get on trips and filling up our apartments and houses for tying nights. And, we had great connections with the 2 local fly shops here too. And they just were incredible. Front Range Anglers and Rocky Mountain Anglers. They both just gave us what we needed, whether it was a creek cleanup or a grill to do a barbecue or a space to host an event. Both of those fly shops were really helpful.
That is cool.
Yeah.
What were some of the conservation projects that you guys did in particular?
We did a really cool, probably my favorite one was stream gauge monitoring with Boulder Flycasters, which is our local Trout Unlimited program on South Boulder Creek. On South Boulder Creek. So they put in the gauges, the sticks with the levels, and we just had students go out there whenever they were available. We tried to get 2 monitors a week, and they would just go and record the levels and send that information back to Trout Unlimited, and they would analyze it and everything like that. But we just sort of provided the manual labor of sorts of, when you're fishing, bring this little app and just write down where the river's at and things like that. That was really fun. But honestly,
is that a Freestone River? I'm assuming. Is that why you had the levels, or was it?
No, it comes out of Gross Mountain Reservoir. So they were more just curious about mainly just flows and levels and fishing and things like that.
Okay,
I never got too involved in the research behind it, but and one of the other really cool projects I enjoyed a lot was pretty. I don't know. It sounds basic, but just creek cleanups. In Boulder, it's very urban, and we have a lot of trash in our local waterway of Boulder Creek. So we spent many a days on a Saturday morning just picking up trash. And it's a lot of people do it, and it's very accessible, which is honestly what makes it so cool, because it's as grassroots as you can get to your local waterway. Just fill a net when you're walking down the river.
That's right.
It's like, because otherwise I just look at it and I get pissed off. I'm like, look at that, water bottle or cigarette butt, just put it in your waiter pocket, put it in the net, throw it out later. You'll feel better.
Yeah. We have a great program in Salt Lake area called Fish for Garbage.
Sure.
And they throw events, and they have, I don't know how many events throughout the year on rivers and lakes where, we'll get a couple hundred people show up, and they got everything from the pincher things to garbage bags, and then lots of swag, and we barbecue, all kinds of things. Exactly. It's really fun. Yep. But I agree. I love the pick up, your trash thing. One of the things I always do is I throw a couple extra, sounds funny, but a couple extra, grocery bags in my pack or in my pocket. Yeah. And it does 2 things for me. One, if I catch a whitey later in the day, I might bag it so I can smoke it.
Exactly.
If I don't do that, usually what I'll do is while I'm walking out, I can pick up some trash and throw it in there and then chuck it. So definitely. Great way to take care of your local waters.
If you don't mind me adding one more conservation project I really enjoyed. They just keep coming up, but In the wintertime, when flows start to drop here, we have all these irrigation ditches for agriculture. And when those, spring flows, summer flows come through and like bring up the water level, those fish get pushed into those agricultural ditches. And then when the water starts to drop, they start basically, drowning on air. So we would go around with the local Trout Unlimited chapter and rescue fish. And we would just, put the waders on and walk through and just scoop fish out of those little ditches and dump them back into the main channel. And it was probably the most tree hugger thing I've ever done. But I loved it. It was great. Everyone was like, what are you doing? We're like, we're saving fish. They're like, oh, that's great. So in Boulder, no one bats an eye at something like that, though.
That's funny. Yeah, I had a buddy who was, he does that up in Idaho, around his local. But what he started doing was he was noodling for them.
Okay.
Because they'd get up under the cut banks, and he's like, "Oh, you got to check this out." He just was like, "I don't know, I'm going to try it,"
Right.
And then he kind of got into this habit of like, and dude, he was pulling beasts out from underneath the bank. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
That's crazy.
And he's crazy. He's like, they get up in here and then they can't get back out. And
exactly.
So it was really wild, just
they need
kind of watching that.
Yeah, definitely.
So you've been a big participant in, getting people involved. I think the Five Rivers program at your local university was a part of that, but let's kind of step back to the overall program and the podcast. And, what were some of your initiatives there and how you drove, people into the fishing, fly fishing side?
Yeah. The TU Costa Five Rivers program really serves as just a great gateway to fly fishing and, helping people get involved. So that's something I sort of tried to bring in with the podcast. And I had a variety of guests. I interviewed the Mayfly Project founders, Jess and Kate Westbrook. I think I've got that correct.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And they're incredible and they have such a driven mission, But then I also interviewed Larry Dahlberg, and he's like just the fishiest guy you can imagine. And I hoped that, those two things that seem sort of different on the surface, but also just show that there's like endless avenues into this sport. You know what I mean? There are ways to get involved in conservation for the environment. There's social, conservation, you might call it, things like the Mayfly Project. And then there's just, those people that have spent days and years on the water mastering their craft. So I really hoped that, by showing that range, people would recognize that there's a space for everybody within fly fishing. It's a huge industry. If you're, that's one thing that a lot of college students are sort of looking for, and I'm actively looking for is, what's my place in the whole workforce thing, right? So where am I going to work and what am I going to do? And I hope that by showing, different walks of life and people that work as guides or people that run nonprofits or people, that are just fly shop employees or work for
small manufacturers, all kinds of stuff.
Exactly. There's endless avenues. And I really hoped that whatever stage somebody was in fly fishing, my podcast could help them move up to their next goal, whatever it might be. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's pretty cool. There's that common ground of fishing, but that's pretty broad, right? And I like to think of the space as, how do I describe this? We have this common ground of fly fishing, and if you start to get active in it, then you start to care about it. And then that care can kind of come out in like a multitude of ways. And those, I think, are the multitudes that you're talking about. Like it could be, hey, I want to support the industry. Well, and now if I'm supporting the industry, I'm therefore supporting the people that are also driving conservation. And I have a vested instance in conservation myself, et cetera. So it's just like compounding effects. It's really cool. I'm a nature guy. I grew up climbing, hiking, backpacking, camping as a kid, and want to have that for generations to come, and want to expose my buddies to it, and et cetera. So, it's a big part of my life too. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's something that you can really become. I'm a very passionate person, which is sometimes my it's a great strength, but a great weakness. Cause I just put like 100%, you know what I mean, into fly fishing or, my schoolwork or whatever it is. And I need to step back sometimes, but fly fishing is great for that because you can give it all of your effort. You can give it all of your effort in the recreational aspect of like getting out and fishing, right? You can think about fishing like a maniac all you want. You could sit there all night and think about fishing and what you're going to do differently, what fly you're going to do. And then you can keep going and like tie flies, come up with new patterns, look at bugs, look at how many legs that mayfly has and think about what you're going to put on your fly to like change it. You know what I mean? Then you go into the conservation and you can, volunteer for Trout Unlimited or Captains for Clean Water or Save Bristol Bay, wherever's local for you, you can get involved. It's really something that has endless possibilities if you're a passionate person that just wants to do something.
Yeah, I love it too. I call it the endless puzzle. It's the puzzle where the last few pieces are always missing. You'll never find it.
Absolutely.
So it's really pretty cool. And I like how you related it to like Captains for Clean Water as well. Like a lot of people get caught up in the whole element of fly fishing and they think trout streams.
Right.
I mean, there's a whole nother, even larger saltwater scene.
Right.
And it's just like, wow, what? Then you dive into that and then you dive into the jungle and then it's like, that's one of the things I really enjoy about, this podcast is we cover everything and I get to talk to guys who are experts in all of those different fields and the various conservation aspects of each one. And they're all different, but at the same time, you start talking fishing and it's like the same language.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And something you hinted at too, water has an interesting dynamic in our world, especially for anglers, because water is necessary for human life, right? You can't live without it. So it's extremely important, but it's also important to me and you because it's our recreation, right? It's how we enjoy being out there. And I think that gives anglers a different lens on environmental issues, especially related to water, like we have our issues with the Colorado River out here in Colorado and all throughout the West. And what are we going to do about that? And I think if people didn't fish and didn't care about, the fish swimming in that river, it's almost not as much would get done to help supply river to water to people, right? It's just, it gives you that element of not only is this necessary to live, but it's necessary for me to live happy because I love doing this, right? So
yeah, it is. That's an interesting perspective. It's like an odd friendship between people and fish, right?
Exactly.
And the water is the commonality there. Yeah, pretty cool. I like how you put that. That's good. Speaking of that, let's talk about one of the specific big conservation efforts that's gone on, something that's been in the news a lot, and that's the Pebble mine scenario. Can you give I know you have a lot of background in that. Can you give a then and now scenario for us?
Yeah. So about 13 years ago, this mine really came to the forefront, especially in the local area of Bristol Bay. And Pebble Limited Corporation is a Canadian company that has mining interests above Lake Iliamna in Alaska, Bristol Bay area. Lake Iliamna feeds just some of the biggest rivers in Alaska and feeds the rivers that are the home for the salmon. So the biggest salmon runs in the world are actively coming through Bristol Bay. They used to be Washington, Oregon, Northern California, but as people lived there, moved there, built dams, pollution, everything just started to move north more remotely. So this mine was a big threat. Because it was there, I don't blame them. It's like one of the largest gold deposits in the world is right there, but I couldn't give less of a shit that it's right there. The salmon are there, and that's what's important. So it was proposed to be an open pit mine, and essentially that's just a big hole in the ground. With that requires construction for roads to be brought in. You have to bring up power to places like that. So it's just a huge project that is extremely high risk. The risk couldn't be higher. It's also one of the most tectonically active places in the world. They call the peninsula there the Valley of 10,000 Smokes because it is just endless volcanoes. it's just really high stakes. The risks of a mine tailings pond failing and polluting the rivers would just be detrimental. Thankfully, though, because of the efforts by Trout Unlimited and the Save Bristol Bay movement and countless other organizations, there's a lot of native interest in this program, and they have their own organizations working on it. Mm-hmm. But thanks to all of those people's effort, the EPA determined that the Pebble mine was not safe in 2023 and essentially put the nail in the coffin for it. To our best, hope, right? It's never completely over. So now the focus has transitioned to what we're referring to as permanent protections for Bristol Bay, and making sure that we don't have to go through this again. This was a 13-year process. The amount of effort, the amount of petitions people signed, I think people by the end of it were like, what, this thing's still going on? It's like the 30th petition I've signed. Right. So, and that's frustrating. So permanent protections for Bristol Bay, whatever that looks like, and making those long lasting. So that's something that's in the work right now. And that's sort of how the movement is transitioning away from just, okay, stop Pebble mine. It's like, how do we protect this place and make sure it's there for my grandkids, your grandkids, everybody's, everybody, and the salmon's grandkids, that's what we're fighting for here. We're fighting for those fish, those bears, those eagles, those osprey, those trout that live and eat the salmon eggs and carrion and everything. That's what's on the line. And it's
not just Bristol Bay. I mean,
right.
You think of it as hey, that's the epicenter of concern, but those fish run thousands of miles upriver and support ecosystems all the way up and down.
Exactly.
So the importance is extremely high. So this new effort, what's the best way for somebody to get involved or find more information on that?
So the best way is still to go through savebristolbay.org. They are still, that's Trout Unlimited's sort of task force almost for fighting the Pebble mine. If you go through a Google search, you'll notice that there's a lot of different organizations working this. One of them is United Tribes of Bristol Bay. So that's a native coalition that's working similar to Trout Unlimited, but their focus, their mission is hey, my peoples have lived there for centuries, since the beginning of time, and they have such an invested interest that goes beyond fishing, right? It goes beyond anything. It's in their culture, their heritage, and that's their motion, right? So there's a lot of different ways to get involved and a lot of different organizations to support.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now it's a finalized stop on the mine or a proposed stop?
No, it's pretty certain. The EPA came through and said, no way. It's pretty much kaputs. But like I said, there's always ways for them to skimp around that, right? So they, the way they do it is this mining company submits a proposal. So, I think that it's possible that they could just go back to the drawing board and rewrite this proposal. What we have noticed in these 13 years is that they are extremely driven to have this mine. They want this mine because I mean, it's one of the largest gold deposits. Yeah, exactly. It's huge. There's a lot of money there. But it's really cool to see that amount of money wasn't able to beat the voice of,
public
people.
Opinion, right?
Yeah, exactly. Public opinion, people that live there. And so it was a really beautiful thing to watch. But also, heartbreaking at times too.
Oh yeah. It's if you haven't been to Bristol Bay or Alaska in some of those rivers and seen those runs, what an experience.
Yeah. No, I feel incredibly lucky. I went up with my dad and my brother after I graduated from high school, and we went to the Alagnac River and stayed at Angler's Alibi. And I was just looking over the bluff there after we went during chum season. So, we actually ended up catching every single species of salmon that was in the river there. There was only the 4. There wasn't the pinks that year. But, at the beginning of the trip, we caught kings. And then we got into the chums, We caught some bright red sockeyes, and then at the end of the trip, we caught silvers, and then we caught trout and grayling. And it's just dumbfounding to see like a river wall to wall of just fish moving up. And then once I saw that, I just knew that it got under my blood. And then the year after that, the summer, I went and worked commercial fishing. Year after that, next 3 years in a row, I just spent at Angler's Alibi, just living the dream, fishing, working, seeing people have their best day ever. I mean, seeing people like come into the lodge with a sore arm because they caught 80 chums on an 8-weight. I'm just like, God, I feel for you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want that,
and for dinner tonight, we're going to have salmon.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. It's funny. A lot of the people that work and live up there, you end up, not liking salmon anymore.
Oh, yeah.
This will be my 6th season, but I'm obsessed. I eat salmon and rice every day on the boat, and just, it's fuel, man. You want to talk about wild game giving you energy. The energy you get from a wild sockeye salmon with a plate of brown rice is pretty nice. Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll never forget my first experience with the sockeye, on their run. And we have kokanee here in Utah, and there's a couple areas you can go and you can see the kokanee run, and it's really cool.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But, they're typically pretty small, and they do run, but they're not thick in the river. There's a lot of them. So for someone here locally, you see it and you're like, wow, I can't believe how many fish, and they stick out because they're so bright and they're battling each other for position. And it's super cool. Great for kids. Great.
Oh my gosh.
And adults.
Perfect.
And adults, really. But I'll never forget going up to Alaska and going out to the first kind of fly out in the beaver and getting in a smaller river and being like, yeah, we're going to go down. We were fishing for char, and it was like, you just start walking and then you're like, I'm going to cross the river. In the river parts. I mean, it's like parting of the Red Sea,
right?
Literally.
Yeah.
You start to walk and you're like, oh my gosh. And they're bumping your legs and they're just like, they're so thick that you look around and you're like, man, if there were ducks in here, they'd just be walking on them,
Right.
And it is amazing to see. And then you're like, oh, that must just be that one spot. And then you continue to walk the river and it's like that for miles and miles, and just so amazing to see.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I've taken, we take some clients out on a fly out, and maybe they're new to fly fishing and they're not familiar with what you're doing there in Alaska. So you take them to a hole and they just see all these fish, these bright red fire truck red sockeyes. And I'm like, okay, I know there's 300 fish in this, 40 square foot area, but there's a 28-inch rainbow sitting 3 feet off the back of them. That's what we're trying to catch. You know what I mean? They're like, what? Like, look at all those damn things. I want to catch one of those. And I'm like, all right, I know you will. You'll get one by the end of the day. But let's focus on that rainbow.
Let's avoid them though.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want those. Right?
Yeah.
They're gonna fray your line and mess with you and run you all around. And
I'll be tying pegged eggs all day if you start getting into those, dude. You're ripping my net up.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, don't worry. That's called a bycatch.
Exactly. Right? Yeah, exactly. They are really cool though. They make a good picture. That's for sure.
They do, man. They stick out like that fire truck and that green mask. They're just so unique. The transformation is really incredible, and the teeth and whatnot. Yeah, really
so gnarly.
Really
so
cool.
Gnarly.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. That is a good showing for sure. So you spent some time up in Alaska. Let's talk a little bit about some of your fishing experience.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit. What do you prefer? Do you like fishing here in the States more? Are you a saltwater guy, or you really like it up in Alaska? Let's talk about that.
For me, I like to chase something new. So, I'd be lying if I said I loved nymphing for trout in Colorado. I don't. I like fishing dry flies. I like fishing streamers. I was into Euro nymphing for like a little bit, but it's never really piqued my interest. But, swinging flies for kings in Alaska, or, I haven't been to the Pacific Northwest to swing for steelhead, but that really gets me going. Just like big spay cast, go out there, big bend, and you just feel like this fly just doop, 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 doop. And you get to the end of that drift and you start pumping, and holy crap, man, when one grabs it, I mean, you just lose your mind. So that is really exciting to me. But I actually just got back from 3 weeks in southeastern Louisiana. My dad grew up there. So I went down there, took the truck, did a bunch of camping, and was just chasing redfish and speckled trout, and really, really enjoyed that.
How were you going about that? Were you on a skiff or paddleboarding? Or
I wish, man.
John boat?
I had my 2 legs. That's all I had. So first thing I did, I went to Baton Rouge, and Orvis has a store there, and I went into the fly shop, and the guy was like, all right, so, kind of boat you got? I'm like, buddy, I got nothing. You know what I mean? So it was really hard work, but I was able to find some spots where I could park the truck and just walk down the beach and find a cut where water's coming in and out, and just, fish the outgoing tides and just almost swing them, actually, cast in and swing it out, and was able to pick up a couple reds. But it was a lot of walking, a lot of times on Google Maps. I didn't realize how much time on Google Maps I would spend as a fisherman. I literally just spend hours looking at coastline or river or whatever it is and finding every single one of those spots. So it was tough work. I got stuck in the marsh a couple of times. I was by myself out there and just kind of took this bend and started walking, and it was pretty solid. It was still sandy, but as I got further up, it just got real muddy. And man, I was up to my waist, and I had my fly rod out, and I was just crawling and just covered in mud. Glad I didn't get stuck. No one was going to come find me. Doing the body roll, right? Everything possible, and brand new reel too. I just got some new reels, and I was excited to fish them, and I brought them out, and they were covered in mud. But they're good reels. Washed them off, fished great. So
no, the fishing in Louisiana is incredible, and the diversity. There's warm water species all over the place, lakes and ponds, and then you have the coastal stuff with the reds and gar, the sheephead. I love fishing for sheephead. They're just super fun.
Cajun permit.
Picky little buggers, man. And, put up a good fight.
No, I grew up going down there every Easter and Thanksgiving, and we'd fish. And, I didn't grow up fly fishing. I grew up as a conventional fisherman. So we'd be out there soaking shrimp or fishing popping corks and things like that. And man, I have endless memories just in the Gulf of Mexico chasing redfish. And then to be able to go back with my fly rod and really do it on my own was really rewarding. So I'm very, very blessed to be able to call Louisiana a place I frequent.
Well, we do, usually an annual trip down there, a bunch of buddies and stuff. So we'll have to give you a jingle next time. We usually have an opening here or there. And it's super fun. We have great time.
Yeah. But to go back to your question about, what I really love, it's hard for me to pick one. I like it all. And I'm not one of those fly fishermen that won't pick up a spinning rod. I grew up fishing rapalas and popping corks and all that stuff, man. I love getting out there and ice fishing and pitching big Senko rigs for bass, like whatever it is. I just like fishing. And now I'm a commercial fisherman every summer now. And I just love being on the water, thinking about fish, thinking how they work. I don't discriminate. However I can catch them, I like to get them.
I'm the same way. I prefer fly fishing. That's the technique that I really like to do. But, I'll give the example. We go out and striper fish out in Massachusetts with a good buddy of mine, Todd Jurgensen. And, some days we'll just be like, hey, let's get some dinner, man. And rip out the conventional gear and go smash some rockfish and whatever, and bring it back, and it's like, this is fantastic.
Man.
And or if it's slow or you're just not seeing the bait like you were hoping for the stripers, it's like, hey, well, let's throw some conventional. Super fun.
I really think that the more different ways you fish, the better the angler you become. If you just limit yourself to fly fishing or conventional fishing, you're not going to see how many different ways fish eat, how many different things they eat, how they act. The more ways you can learn how to fish and be good at it is just as important. Like if you're fishing if you're just starting to fish muskie, right? And you've never felt how a muskie eats a sucker off of a float or off of the bottom, right? You're never going to really know how it's going to want to take your fly, right? So going out there, doing it with the fly, doing it with the bait caster, and then, get out there, soak a sucker, watch a muskie crush it, think about how it attacks the bait. There's endless things to learn with fishing, and doing it different ways is really, really helpful as an angler.
Keyword limit, right?
Yeah.
You said it. You are limiting yourself. And the other thing I like to do is, you look at conventional fishermen. There's some of the best anglers in the world, right? Bass guys or whatever, muskie guys, etc. One of the things I really love to do is just watch how the crankbaits or stick baits, how they act in the water.
Yeah.
And then, you see a stick bait that you're like pulling ripping that plug, and it's like diving, and you're like, oh man, how do I get my fly to get that action?
Right.
That, no wonder it triggered. It looks interesting to me.
Exactly.
So I agree.
Exactly.
The more you can try and check it out, it's better. Hey, and if you're not a conventional angler and you don't get on any one of the fly fishing channels on TV, fishing channels on TV, and just watch it for an hour. You'll learn something for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, cool. We're getting ready to wrap up here. I want to talk about that technical grid technique that you use, or tactics that you use. Why don't you dive into that?
Yeah. When I'm fishing, I want to be efficient and intentional with what I'm doing, right? So I'm in Colorado now, so I'm thinking about nymphing a lot right now and how I'm going to fish the river. When I approach the river, you don't run up right next to the riverbank. You think that there could be a fish from 2 inches of water on this side of the river to 2 inches of water on the far side of the river. And I just give it like a 3-foot row going down the whole thing. And then I divide it into sections. And I go in there and I drop my first cast almost right along the bank. As shallow as I think a fish would be, I'm going to nymph right through there. Then I'm going to take a step forward and nymph through that section. And then another step and nymph through that section. And then I might think, okay, so I just fished those 3 sections of the river right there. But maybe I'm too shallow. Maybe I'm too deep. Maybe I got the wrong flies, right? So just always thinking tactically, I sort of call it, about where are you fishing and what are you fishing, right? So are you fishing in a high density area of fish? Are you fishing where there's a low density chance that there's fish? All those things come into play, and just making sure that every single bit of water is covered and is fished in whatever way you think a fish is going to eat, right? So if you think the fish are going to be eating deep, make sure that you fish every spot on that section with a deep fly, and then go back and think, okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe they're not eating deep. Bring your flies up, change your flies, all those sort of things. Change the color of your flies, whatever it might be, and go through that whole section again and fish it. And for me, it's really been effective, because sometimes when I'm fishing, I get a little zoned out. I'm just happy to be there, right? And then I realize that I just soaked my flies to the same, 4-foot wide, 10-foot long run, the same section, 8 times. And I'm like, there wasn't a fish there the first 2. And I think they were going to eat in the first 2 if they were going to eat. They saw my flies. So I need to be actively thinking, okay, fish the next section that's, 3 inches that way, 8 inches that way, whatever it might be. If I'm fishing like a lake, still water, I'm going to fish in a fan pattern, right? I'm going to start my first cast on the left, 25 feet, 30 feet, strip it back at a certain strip speed, try and make 5 casts maybe in the fan. And then I'm going to say, okay, I'll throw it, 50 feet, whatever it might be, strip it slow, strip it too fast, one slow, too fast, one slow, whatever it is. And just really change your mindset to be thinking as much as you can about fishing. Just really dive into it and think, cover the water with every tactic you sort of know how to fish. And I definitely can't claim that to be like an original idea at all. That's something I learned from, watching people and talking to guides that had years and years of experience, and just, eliminating those little variables of fishing the same spot 3 casts in a row when you could have fished that one cast and then 2 other spots. I think you'll end up catching more fish.
Yeah. And I think, it's funny that you started out the conversation with, I'm here in Colorado, pressured water.
Right.
You often have us, I'm going to use the term beat. You have a smaller beat, right? Because you got other people around, et cetera. So you want to optimize your space on the river.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
And I really like how you mentioned, every 3 feet, and you really talked about kind of going across the river. You didn't use the same terminology, but you described it in the same way. It's a 3D grid. So it's across, but it's from bottom to top as well.
Yes.
And if you think of it as cubes, like, hey, if in any time I'm fishing a beat that's tight and I want to make sure I cover it, I want to cross every cube.
Right.
It's the way I look at it. And the one thing that I like to do as well is when I'm in that mode of like, okay, I'm going to grid this thing out. I'm going to really filter out this section of river and determine if there's fish there, is the technique that you talked about, fishing different sections. And what I call it is new water. And a lot of times what I'll do is, like you described, especially if I'm standing in the river and fishing upstream, is I may fish the right side of the river and get 4 or 5 drifts there. And I'll skip the entire middle section and I'll go to the left side, because I know I've kind of disturbed the water over here and I want to get fresh new water over here. And then I might, jump into another area behind a boulder but mentally I'm going, okay, what part of the grids did I cover?
Yes.
In essence. So I really like, especially when you're prospecting a river, it's somewhere where I'm not familiar with, or it's a spot that I'm not familiar with, or a new river or a new species I'm going after, et cetera. It becomes very, like you said, tactical in nature.
Right.
Now I know, okay, the fish are sitting mid-column. I'm having success at this area. Well, now I feel confident. I can go to other places on the river, et cetera, or whatever, and maybe start in those zones and be more successful.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. If you can pinpoint the fish, then you don't have to waste your time almost, right? You get familiar with your local waterway and you realize, okay, flows are at this amount, got sun, it's a little breezy, there's a little chop on the water, whatever it might be. And then you're like, okay, I've been here in this situation, and this little grid line, this little column, whatever it is, that cube worked great for me last time.
Right.
And you can hone in and you can fish that cube, that run right there, that seam, whatever it is, and you can be more successful as an angler. Yeah. And that's just the reward. You know what I mean? I've never, you feel a little bit of reward when you kind of, you get to the end of your drift and you realize, oh God, there's a, 8-inch trout on there. That's kind of cool. Yeah. But the reward is incredible when you give it the intention and you're like, okay, I think there's a fish here. And these are the steps for me to catch it. And then you catch it and you're like, holy crap, I did that. You know what I mean? That was my effort, my knowledge at work, really working to catch that fish. Yeah.
It's sight fishing without seeing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's something that applies everywhere. If you're swinging a run, on the Deschutes or whatever it is, like, you can think about that grid. If you're fishing redfish in Louisiana, you're fishing an oyster bar. Think about that oyster bar really well. Get to know that oyster bar, fish every angle of it, fish at different tides, and just figure out where those fish are sitting, what little cube of water they're sitting in, and you might be more successful.
Yeah. Well, Cliff, hey man, great having you on the show.
Thank you.
Taught us a lot about the conservation effort. Really cool program with TU and Coastal and the Five Rivers Project. I loved talking about that with Jackson Oaks. It was probably a year ago now, and it's great to see that program's grown, and you've been a huge influence to that. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Who's hosting the podcast now?
Her name is Linnea Turner. is her name.
Linnea
And she's a student. I don't know the university, but she's doing a great job. It's cool to see, she takes it a different way than I took it,
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend checking out. The coolest episode so far was about etymology and just bugs and how they work and, all that cool stuff. So great podcast still. And
it's still the emerging podcast.
Exactly. Right? The emerging podcast. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, go check that out. And then, thanks for filling us in on the Pebble Mine, where it's at and whatnot. Get involved there if you can, guys. If you see that as an area of interest for you, etc. Always loving that kind of support. And Cliff, let's stay in touch, man. Let's get you on a good red strip. We'll get you out on a skiff where you can go get some big old bowls and really bend the rod.
I want to learn how to pull. That's my goal.
Everybody says that until they're up there in the wind and then they're like, hey, can I use that pole down there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, give me the 10 weight. Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Awesome.
All right, man. Well, once again, thanks for coming on the show. And that's it for us this week. Guys,
Thank you,
we'll be back next week and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.